Good evening. Let us begin very quietly and very honestly. We honor religion as the sincere reaching of the human heart. We honor the churches that have sheltered our prayers, the rites that have steadied our minds, the scriptures that have given us language for our hope. We honor the candles and the organs and the pulpits and the sacraments, because behind them are men and women yearning for God. Never imagine that this is a talk to tear down what is dear to you. We honor every altar that an honest heart has built. Now, when you stop to think of it, religion as form can do some very good things for us. It can point, it can remind, it can gather us into community and put our attention, if only for an hour, upon the things of spirit. It can organize our time and lift our emotion. It can teach, it can inspire, it can say, look here, look higher. But let us say this plainly. It cannot hand you the living Christ as an inner realization. No outer ceremony, no creed, no authority can substitute for your own conscious contact with the presence that dwells within you. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. If the pew, the robe, the hymn, the sermon do not awaken presence, then they remain reminders, useful, yes, but not the life itself. Now let me illustrate that. You can sit in the most beautiful service and feel exalted, and it is good. But the test will come at noon when the telephone brings a problem, or at 3 o'clock when fear knocks, or at midnight when pain whispers. In that moment, ask yourself, not religiously, but practically, am I living from belief about Christ, or from the felt Christ within? When you stop to think of your day, can you detect beneath your thoughts a presence that cannot be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled, yet announces itself as peace? Or are you carrying sacred words in memory without the word moving as life in you? Again, this is not criticism. It is an invitation to an upgrade. Tonight, our purpose is to learn how to move from creed to contact, from words to inward evidence, from talking about God to the actual sense of God. And we will keep it measurable. We will speak in terms you can practice. It isn't too difficult to begin the day with recognition. The difficult thing begins an hour later. So we shall speak of morning recognition, then hourly remembrance, and the quiet sealing before sleep. We shall speak of the difference between the uplift of a service and the sustained awareness that carries you through Tuesday and Thursday and the last 10 minutes of Friday afternoon. Never forget that religion may point, but only inner contact reveals. Keep your forms if you love them. They can be beautiful vessels. But do not allow the vessel to replace the wine. Do not allow the sign to be taken for the substance. Our work together is to find and to practice the living Christ within, until presence itself becomes the authority and liberty follows where you are. Now we must say something that is not pleasant, but it is the truth that frees. Look at the human scene as it parades daily before us. Sin, disease, death, poverty, accidents, heartbreak, fear, resentment, injustice. We do not say it with bitterness, we say it with honesty. If, in these very conditions, God were actively present as the operative power, then you would be in a terrible moral position. You would be compelled to say that God has done this to me, that God has willed this for my child, that God has arranged this tragedy for my neighbor. And when you stop to think of it, that is an impossibility. It would make God the author of our ills. Don't allow that in your thought for a single moment. Therefore, we are brought, by simple moral logic, to the only conclusion that does not slander God. Much of human living shows little or no God presence or God power. An absence of realized presence. Not an absence of God in reality, but an absence of conscious contact with God in experience. We can fill the air with doctrine and still have chaos. We can repeat scripture and still have fear. We can build altars and still have sickness. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. That is not theology. That is the measure of contact. Now let me illustrate that. I have known a man with perfect church attendance, faithful, generous, a pillar of his congregation. He could quote creed and catechism. He wore the form beautifully. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, he lay awake with a heart racing, terrified of losing his position, resentful of a colleague, and in his body a recurring pain that no test could quite explain. He prayed, yes, he said words to God, but the words never broke through to that still place where presence announces itself as peace that cannot be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled, yet is unmistakably there. The form touched his mind. It did not touch the fear. The creed rested on his lips. The Christ had not risen in his awareness. After enough years of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely. As soon as a contact with God is established, harmony is restored. Maybe first as a quieting, then as a release of resentment, then as a change in the body, and at last as order appearing in circumstances. It still is not easy for the natural man, because the mind wants words and explanations. But contact is a different order. Doctrine can stand beside a hospital bed and argue. Contact walks in, and the room becomes calm. Never forget that our troubles do not prove God's cruelty. They reveal the absence of conscious contact with God. This is not a whip. It is a direction. It isn't too difficult to say a prayer in the morning. The difficult thing begins an hour later, when the phone rings and the world makes its claims. In that hour, if you find fear ruling, do not blame God, and do not even condemn yourself. Acknowledge the fact, I have lost remembrance. Then turn quietly to regain it. For the difference is not between religion and irreligion. The difference is between doctrine and presence, between talk about Christ and the living Christ within. Where that presence is welcomed, liberty follows. Where it is forgotten, mortality makes its report. Now we come to the crux of it. Believing in Christ and realizing Christ are not the same order of experience. Belief is of the mind, mental assent, admiration, reverence, historical acceptance. It is valuable. It can cleanse the mind of crudeness. It can lift the emotion. It can set a direction. We were all given, at some point, a belief in the goodness of God and the worthiness of the Master. And that belief has kept us from much folly. But it still is in the realm of faith, words, thoughts, images in the mind about something holy that, to us, is yet outside. Realization is different. Realization is not about Christ. Realization is Christ announcing itself within as a living government. It is an inward event. It cannot be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled. Yet it is unmistakably present as life itself taking the helm of your awareness, steadying, quieting, ruling. When that inner government appears, fear loosens without argument. Resentment dissolves without effort. And the mind, which a moment before was clamoring for explanations, falls silent because a presence has entered the room of your own being. Now, religion, because it is an outer instrument, has often trained us to relate to Christ as external, a figure in history, a story remembered, a power distant, to be called down. We were taught to gaze outward, to the page, to the altar, to the sky. But the Master's word does not leave you there. The kingdom of God is within you. When you stop to think of it, that should end the search in the outer and begin the practice of turning within for contact. Don't allow the mind to put 20 centuries and a geography between you and what the Master revealed. The revelation was and is interior. Again, notice the difference in fruit. We may speak of liberty and live in bondage. We may profess peace and yet tremble at the ring of a telephone. We may declare God our supply and yet clutch and calculate until our pulse is tight. We may recite forgiveness and still rehearse injuries in the secrecy of the night. That reveals belief without realization. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. Take that not as condemnation, but as a diagnostic instrument. It tells you, here and now, whether you are living from words about Christ or from the living Christ within. Now let me illustrate that. A woman said to me, "I have always believed in Jesus since childhood." And she did. She lit candles, she sang hymns, she could quote beautiful passages. But every audit season her stomach knotted, her sleep left her, her temper grew sharp. One evening, after she had tried every prayer she knew, she fell very still, no pleading, no words. And in that stillness, something rose, an I within, and announced itself as quiet assurance. The figures didn't change that night, but she did. The bondage to figures snapped. By morning there was the same paper on the desk, but not the same woman at the desk. That is realization beginning. Inner government replacing outer dependence. Never forget that. Belief speaks about Christ. Realization lives from Christ as inner presence. Belief tries to convince the mind. Realization silences it. Belief hopes for liberty. Realization is liberty wherever you are. So, from this hour, measure gently, honestly. Is there presence? If there is, you will know it by the fruit: peace, dominion, a softening of fear. If there isn't, do not argue. Turn within and seek contact, because only there is the Christ you admire, revealed as the life you are. Now we must be very clear, and still very honoring. Hymns, sacraments, prayer books, sermons, these are good servants. They gather our wandering attention, they lift our thought. They create an atmosphere in which the heart can become reverent. They can steady the emotions and bring the mind to a higher pitch for a little while. In their rightful place, they are like lanterns along a dark path. But hear this plainly. No lantern, however bright, is the sun. No outer ceremony, no revered authority, no beautiful habit can confer the inward anointing by proxy. They can point. They cannot impart the living Christ. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. Forms may open the window. Only inner contact lets in the air. When you stop to think of it, the reason is very simple. External things act upon the mind and the senses. Music moves the feeling. Architecture awes the eye. Language occupies the thought. But the faculty by which God is known is not the human mind. It requires a different faculty than the faculty of the human mind. Spirit cannot be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled. Therefore, spirit cannot be obtained by physical proximity to a building, a person, or a ritual. You may kneel in a cathedral, you may touch a robe, you may receive a sacrament, you may read a holy page, and yet, unless there is awakened within you that still faculty of receptivity, that inner hush in which presence announces itself, you have been uplifted, yes, but not anointed. You have been instructed, perhaps, but not ignited. Now here is the subtle danger. We substitute. We count attendance as attainment. We take familiarity for intimacy. We make a record of services, books, classes, and think that belonging equals being. Don't allow that. A wedding ring is a form. Love is an inner life. A family photograph is a form. The mother's heart is an inner life. So with religion. You may know every creed by heart and yet not know within your own heart the quickening of I that speaks in the deep silence. You may sit in the front pew and still find Monday morning that fear governs you, and resentment drives you, and appetite orders you about. Now let me illustrate that. A man, devoted to his choir, wore his robe like a uniform. He knew the anthems, he knew the liturgy, he knew the calendar. During service, his face shone with uplift. But an hour later, in traffic, a horn startled him, and out came old anger. By afternoon, a letter at work, and out came a familiar dread. By evening, a small pain, and out came the catalogue of diseases. It isn't too difficult to be uplifted in a service. The difficult thing begins an hour later. Why? Because what the form touched was the mind and the senses. What was not touched, because only you can permit it to be touched, was that inner faculty beyond mind in which the living Christ takes the helm. Again, this is not a rebuke to the vessel. It is a reminder of the wine. Authority, priest, pastor, teacher, book, has a holy place as witness and pointer. But no authority can stand between you and your God and effect a transformation for you. No hand laid upon your head can, of itself, awaken your own eye. The anointing is God to God within you. It is interior. It is solitary. It is quiet. It is born when, even in the midst of form or far from it, you become still and receptive, and a presence that cannot be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled announces itself unmistakably as peace. So keep your forms if they help. Let them lift, let them point, but never substitute them for contact. Let every hymn, every page, every sacrament be a finger saying, "Turn within." And when the uplift fades, as uplift will, do not complain about the form. Acknowledge the fact. The mind has resumed its old government. Then, gently, return to the interior. For outer form may uplift the mind, but only inner contact awakens the living Christ. Never forget that. Now let us be very practical about how realization actually arrives. It does not fall like a bolt because we signed a membership card or read a chapter. It ripens. First, there is conviction, faith. We hear, we read, we are told that God is the life of our being, that the Christ is within, that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. We feel a rightness in it. We say, yes. But it still is in the realm of faith. It is a holy beginning, and we do not despise beginnings. Never despise that early stage. The seed is real, even if the harvest is not yet on your table. Only, do not stop there. Then come the evidences, what, in modern language, we call demonstrations. As we turn within, even briefly, even awkwardly, a presence that cannot be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled begins to announce itself as gentle effects. Not fireworks, effects. The fear that used to leap at the sight of a bill doesn't leap so high. The resentment that would throb for hours fades in minutes. A pain that argued loudly in the night grows quiet and, without fanfare, ceases. A confusion at work that had 10 voices loses 9 of them, and the one remaining voice points to a simple step, and the matter resolves, not by force, not by cleverness, but by a stillness that you allowed to govern you for a few moments. After enough years of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely. As soon as a contact with God is established, harmony is restored. Sometimes at once, sometimes as a gentle unwinding, but restored because of contact, not because of personality or willpower. Now let me illustrate that. A young father, anxious over money, made a practice, morning and once each hour, to stop and acknowledge very quietly, I. No pleading, just recognition. For 2 weeks, nothing on the outside changed, but inside, the panic lost its grip. He noticed that he no longer checked his account every hour. He found himself less sharp with the children. On the 15th day, a delay that had held up a payment cleared, and funds arrived. He had not manipulated it. He had practiced contact. The fruit, first inward, then outward, followed the contact. Again, think of the explorers, Peary and Bird, long before they set foot where no man had gone, knew there was a way to the pole. They knew beyond all doubt, so much so that they invested life and treasure on the conviction. But it really wasn't knowledge. That was faith. Only when they reached the ice and saw with their own eyes did conviction become knowledge. Only then had they moved from belief to arrival. So it is here. Faith sets your face in the right direction. Evidences are your mileposts, your supplies found at way stations, your reassurance that the way is true. And then, one bright day or one bright night, without trumpet or argument, the very presence announces itself within. Not as emotion, as a living knowing. The mind, which cannot embrace infinity, falls still. The I of your own being steps forward, and with it, dominion. Never forget that realization is not opinion. It is the ripening of faith into evidence, and evidence into direct knowing. Treasure each stage. Honor the first tender yes. Notice the quiet evidences, but keep going until the inner arrival, until presence itself is your certainty, and liberty becomes your way of life. Now we arrive at a point that must be faced if we are to make any real headway. Paul very clearly states that the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God. Do not take that as an insult. Take it as a statement of faculty and function. The natural man is the mind operating by senses, by memory, by reasonings, by the record of history and the report of appearances. It is a wonderful instrument in its place. It can add figures, read books, analyze data, argue a case. But it cannot, by any of those movements, embrace infinity. It requires a different faculty than the faculty of the human mind to know God. When you stop to think of it, the mind always works with what can be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled, or with the thoughts derived from those reports. The mind functions in sequence, in past and future, in cause and effect, as appearances present themselves. It deals with arguments. It compares authorities. It weighs opinions. Useful, yes. Saving? No. For God contact is not manufactured by syllogisms. You cannot reason up to spirit any more than you can climb a ladder to the sky. The ladder is good for the roof. The sky is another order. Now let me illustrate that. A noted professor, brilliant, published, honored, received the sentence of an incurable disease. He wrote, with extraordinary clarity, that there is no self beyond the brain's chemistry, no life beyond the flicker of neurons, and therefore the honest man meets extinction bravely. He was not a wicked man. He was a logical man. His instrument, the intellect, surveyed the realm of appearances and, having no other faculty awake, drew the only conclusion it could: annihilation. If God were to be known by argument, he would have found him, because his arguments were immaculate. But the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God. The mind itself, being finite, cannot embrace infinity. And so, brilliance ended in despair. Again, see the contrast in those who have touched another level. Artists, composers, inventors, explorers, at their best, they do not merely calculate, they receive. Beethoven, deaf to outward sound, hears what cannot be heard and writes it down. Einstein speaks of a combinatory play in which answers arrive whole, not deduced step by step. Edison dozes in a chair with steel balls in his hand to catch that instant between sleep and waking where the idea drops in. The great physicists, the wizards of industry, the poets, they all, when they break through, confess that there is a source of inspiration within themselves not produced by toil alone. They move beyond what the mind can comprehend and reach out into the intuitional. That is a hint. If so for art and science, how much more for spirit? Therefore, if religion confines itself to doctrine, to exegesis, to learned debate, it remains in the province of the natural man. It may refine the mind, it cannot awaken the living Christ. Don't allow your practice to end at the border of intellect. Withdraw, for a few moments many times a day, from the traffic of thought. Become still. Open a different ear. There is within you a faculty of inner hearing, a transcendental awareness, a quiet intuition by which spirit announces itself, not as an argument, not as an emotion, but as a presence that cannot be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled, yet is unmistakably there. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. The mind can recite that. Only inner receptivity can prove it. So we must enter the inner way. Never forget that. Now we come to the great reversal, without which none of this bears its full fruit. The Master spoke not of a doctrine about you, but of an I, life itself. And that I is closer to you than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. Don't put it up in the sky or back in history. Believe that it means I, the I of your own being. That I is life. Life itself is God. And the first movement of realization is to relocate identity from the surface, body and mind, to that indwelling I. When you stop to think of it, most of us have been living as if body and mind were the governors and we the subjects. My stomach rules me. My nerves drive me. My thoughts won't let me sleep. My body is getting old and I must obey it. That is the mortal report. That is the natural man's confession. And religion, unintentionally, has sometimes reinforced this helplessness by teaching us to wait for a God outside to change the machinery, while we stand by as spectators, hoping for relief. Don't allow that. If the kingdom is within you, then the government must be within you. And the government of that kingdom is the I that the Master revealed. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. Liberty comes when the I within is acknowledged as governor. Now let me illustrate the reversal. Say quietly within yourself, I have a body. That simple sentence turns the world right side up. If I have a body, I am not a body. If I have a body, the body is mine. It does not own me. Then say, this mind is mine. If the mind is mine, I am not the mind. If the mind is mine, I may direct it, quiet it, instruct it, rather than be driven by its habits and fears. Ownership is government. The owner is responsible. The owner is the one with authority. You, as I, have a body. You, as I, have a mind. You govern that mind. You do not have to be the victim of your mind. Never forget that. Again, notice the antithesis. Not the body governing life, but life governing the body. Not fear governing thought, but I governing fear. Not appetite dictating conduct, but I, quiet, present, directing appetite. This I cannot be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled. Yet it announces itself as a settled sense of being that says, without words, I am here. When that presence is felt, the body responds as a servant to a wise master. The mind, which has been noisy and insistent, falls into place as a fine instrument in skilled hands. Now religion as form may say to you, endure, wait. Perhaps the Lord will come and do something to you. Realization says, I and my Father are one. The Lord is here as my very life. The difference is dominion. Waiting places authority outside. Realization reveals authority within. Do not misuse this by personal willpower. That is still the mind trying to rule. The dominion of I is gentle, not forceful, authoritative, not aggressive. It appears as quiet order. It sets things right from within. When the remembrance of I stands at the center, the mind receives instruction and the body receives life. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. In your thought life, in your nerves, in your flesh, in your affairs. So begin to speak truly about yourself. Not, I am afraid, but fear appears in my mind, and I, the eye of God, can witness it and bid it be still. Not, my body makes me miserable, but I have a body, and I acknowledge the life that governs, restores, and maintains it. Not, my thoughts run away with me, but this mind is mine. I quiet it in the presence and direct it in peace. Practice that reversal gently, repeatedly. Each time you do, you dethrone the impostors and enthrone the rightful governor. And in that enthronement, the signs follow. The mind calms, the body responds, and a practical liberty appears because the Christ within has taken the helm. Now having seen the reversal of government, life within taking its rightful place over mind and body, we must say plainly what replaces religion used as a substitute. It is not rebellion against church, scripture, hymn, or sacrament. Keep them if you will. Only refuse to make them stand in for the one thing needful: inner contact. The replacement is the interior practice those forms were meant to serve: stillness, surrender, and remembrance. Not once a week uplift, but a life turned within to the living Christ. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. That is not poetry. It is instruction. Stillness first. By stillness, I do not mean a blank, an emptiness, a dull fog behind the eyes. I mean a conscious pausing that breaks the whirlpool of the mind, a deliberate stepping back from what can be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled, and from the thought stream about those reports. It is attentive openness, alert, unstraining, receptive. You withdraw for a few moments from the argument, the clock, the plan, and you allow a quiet to form, like a clearing in a forest. In that clearing, a presence, which no sense can register, announces itself as peace. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. Peace is the first sign that you have moved from the mind's surface into the interior where God speaks. Now let me illustrate that. A mother, between stove and sink, with 3 demands at once, learned to set the spoon down for 30 seconds. No pleading, no words, just I, silently, and a listening. The kitchen did not cease to be a kitchen, but the tyranny of it ended. The same ingredients, the same children, the same clock, and a different center. That is stillness functioning, not escape from duty, but entrance of presence into duty. Surrender next. Don't allow the mind to call surrender defeat. Spiritual surrender is release. Release of personal outlining, personal will, personal fear. It is the inner gesture that says, I take my hands off the levers. Thy life, thy wisdom, thy will be the government here. You stop dictating terms to God, how, when, through whom, and you stop bargaining with fear. You acquiesce to the Christ impulse rising in you, even when it crosses your cherished schedule. Acknowledge him in all thy ways means precisely this. Defer within to the wisdom that cannot be argued into being. After enough years of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely. As soon as a contact with God is established and personal outlining is laid down, harmony begins to show itself. First as quietness, then as a right word, then as outward order. Now let me illustrate that. A man, entangled in a business dispute, rehearsed speeches in his head until his blood pounded. One morning he surrendered his outline. No more inner courtroom. Sat quietly, and listened. A single, unexpected step presented itself. A humble phone call with no argument in it. He made it. The matter that had been knotted for weeks began to unknot, not by force, not by cleverness, but by the government of presence. Finally, remembrance. Stillness and surrender are not events to admire. They are to be repeated until they weave a life. Acknowledge him in all thy ways, not only in crisis, not only at bedtime, but many times a day. It isn't too difficult to touch God in the morning. The difficult thing begins an hour later. So measure your progress by remembrance. How often do you return? How quickly do you notice you have forgotten? Each return is victory. Each moment of recollection is contact, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Forgetfulness is not failure. It is a bell. Hear it and turn. Acquaint now thyself, again and again, and be at peace. This, then, is the replacement for outer dependence. An inner life practiced in stillness, sealed by surrender, sustained by remembrance. Keep the forms if they help. Let them remind you. But never substitute them for contact. Turn within, quietly, often, and let the living Christ, felt as I, do for you what no habit, no ceremony, no authority can do. Govern you with peace. Now let us come down to the ground, where this becomes life and not theory. We begin the day. Devote the first 10 or 15 minutes, before news, before phone, before the world's pull, to conscious recognition of presence. Sit quietly. Not a long list, not a complaint. Recognition. Thou art here. Or simply, I. Or, speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. Acknowledge him in all thy ways, at the doorway of the day. Let that recognition be the government that enters first, while the mind is still soft and the senses have not yet claimed you. Don't outline. Don't argue. Become still, surrender inwardly, and let a presence that cannot be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled announce itself as peace. That is the seal upon your morning. It isn't too difficult to touch God in the morning. The difficult thing begins an hour later. When you stop to think of it, life rushes back with its old momentum. Emails, traffic, personalities, appetites, deadlines, and the natural man resumes his throne if there is no remembrance. Therefore, make this a structured practice. Set a simple cue for hourly contact, a clock that chimes, a phone that breathes a soft tone, the turn of a page, the end of a meeting, opening a door. At each cue, pause for 15 seconds, 30 if you can, and acknowledge silently, Thou art here, or I am, or Speak, Lord. No pleading, recognition. By the degree of one's success in remembering, one can measure the rate of their spiritual progress. Now let me illustrate that. A woman wrote a single word on a card, I, and placed it by her keyboard. Each time she reached for the mouse, her eye met the word. She stopped, 3 breaths, I, and listened. In a week, she discovered that the frantic pace that had been driving her smoothed out, and problems that had seemed knotted yielded to one simple next step. Not by cleverness, but by contact. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. The hour marks, kept simply, keep you in liberty. Use the day as a laboratory. Irritation flares. Don't fight it mentally. Don't rehearse a speech. Pause. Turn within. Thou art here. Fear grips. Don't wrestle with pictures of tomorrow. Pause. I am. Lust, pride, despair, envy, they are motions in the mind. They are not the governor. You, as I, have a mind. You govern that mind. Step back for a few moments from what can be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled, and re-establish contact. You will find that the edge dulls, the compulsion loosens, the right word or restraint arrives. That is demonstration, the evidence that contact governs. Finally, before you sleep, do not retire without acknowledgement. Sit a moment in the quiet. Not a scolding, not a tally of failures. Review the day with remembrance. Where did presence break through? Where did you forget, and how quickly did you return? Give thanks for each return. Where you missed an hour, don't condemn. Seal it now. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. Let the last awareness be, Thou art here. And you will discover that even in sleep, the inner government continues its quiet work. And you wake more quickly to remembrance in the morning. Never forget that. Christ within is realized by disciplined, repeatable remembrance, morning, hourly, and before sleep. Now we must speak of demonstrations. What, in modern language, we call evidences. The proof of Christ within is not talk, not warmth of feeling in a meeting, not the eloquence of our quotations. The proof is demonstrable harmony and inner freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. Therefore, when the contact is made, something shows. It may be quiet, it may be gradual, but it shows. First, let us be plain about what we are not doing. We are not engaging in positive thinking, which is the effort of the mind to paste a bright label over a dark fact. We are not using mental coercion, straining, affirming, repeating as if volume of thought could command God. We are not bargaining with God. If you do this, I'll do that. Don't allow that. What we are doing is letting the Christ life be the activity within us. We cease from our mental labors. We become still. We surrender outlining. We acknowledge I, and we let God be God in the midst of us. Now, here are the first evidences, the immediate inner signs that you can watch for. Calm where there was agitation. You discover that the pounding argument in the head loses its drum and a hush arrives. Wisdom where there was confusion. Out of the many clamoring options, one simple rightness steps forward. Tenderness where there was judgment. The hard opinion softens, understanding takes its place. Strength where there was fatigue. Not a nervous push, but a quiet stamina that carries you through the necessary work without strain. A presence that cannot be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled announces itself as peace, and with peace, a soundness of thought and feeling. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. Peace is the first sign. Now, let me illustrate that. A woman, stung by an unjust remark, felt the old heat rising. She paused, 15 seconds. And listened. The reply she was composing dissolved. In its place came a simple, kind sentence. She spoke it, and the tension in the room broke. Not by cleverness, but by contact. Or a man, late afternoon, eyes burning, work unfinished, paused at his hourly cue. Thou art here. He did not whip himself forward. He sat a minute. Then, with no drama, the needed strength came, and the work finished easily by dinner. Then come the outer evidences, often delayed, but sure. Right ideas appearing when and where they are needed. Right timing. The door that would not open yesterday opens of itself today. Unexpected help, an introduction, a letter, a remission you did not engineer. Changed conditions. What was tangled begins to untangle. What was withheld is released. What was lost is found. These are the signs of a government that is not your personal will performing things for you that you yourself could never do. Now, let me illustrate that. A family, months in a housing snarl, had no way forward. They made their practice, morning, hourly, night. One evening, in that quiet before sleep, an inner nudge, check a listing they had dismissed. They obeyed. A vacancy, posted an hour earlier, fit their need exactly. The application, which had been impossible, was waved through because of a policy shift announced that same day. No pleading brought it, no pressure forced it. Contact aligned them with an order already at work. Again, a body tense with a pain that had been arguing for days. No wrestling, no fear scan of symptoms. Rest. The muscles, like soldiers at ease, gradually dropped their arms. Sleep came without pills. In the morning, the argument was gone. This is not sensation. This is government. Now a gentle warning. Do not go chasing sensations, lights, thrills, voices. Don't try to manufacture a holy feeling. Contact may be quiet, subtle, even wordless, yet it carries authority. How do you know? Peace that holds, a rightness that does not argue, a patience that makes space for timing, a love that does not keep score. Measure by liberty, not by fireworks. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. As liberty appears, of mind, of nerve, of circumstance, acknowledge it, give thanks, and continue the practice. Never forget that. Now, for a few moments, let us be still. Sit easily, feet comfortable on the floor, hands at rest, eyes gently closed or lowered. Let the breath come and go as it wishes. No strain, no effort, no trying to make something happen. We are withdrawing for just a little while from what can be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled, and from the traffic of thought about those reports. Simply be here. Now, imagine, just imagine, that you are sitting a few inches above the top of your head, as if on a small ledge, very quiet, looking down at the mind. See it as an instrument on the desk of your being. Thoughts move like birds across a sky, like headlines on a ticker. You are the witness, not the traffic. Say within yourself, gently, "This mind is mine." Feel what that does. Then, "I have a body." Feel what that does. The body and the mind are yours. They are not the governor. You are not inside the thought. You are above it, looking kindly at it. Now introduce the inner word. Repeat softly within yourself, without effort, as on the breath. I. 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 Not the personal ego, not the name on the envelope. The I before thought. The I that was before your first memory and will be after this thought passes. Just I. 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 Let it be a light touch, not a chant, a recognition, as if the very act of noticing this word opens a door into quiet. Again, I. I. And listen, as if you were hearing an I come up within you. Not sound, not emotion, a quiet certainty announcing itself. A presence that cannot be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled begins to be here as peace. Stay above the mind. If a thought comes, smile at it from your ledge and return. I. I. Now, as you rest there, let the I that is life speak in its own voice inside your hearing. Not words you push, but words you receive. Be still and know that I am God. I will never leave you nor forsake you. I go before thee to make the crooked places straight. Neither do I condemn thee. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Hear them as if spoken from the center of your own being. Let them fall like soft rain on the mind and the body. Stay a moment more. Breathe as you breathed. I. I. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Notice the ease, the softening, the quiet authority that needs no argument. If the mind starts up, don't allow it to take the chair. Return to the ledge, smile, and let I place you again in government. I. I. Be still and know, I am here. I am ever here. Rest there. Even this brief touch is contact. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. Thank you. Now, as we go from this room, let this be clear and simple. Keep the forms if you wish. Keep the hymn you love, the scripture reading, the fellowship, the quiet of a sanctuary. They are good servants when they remind. They are poor masters when they replace. Don't allow the symbol to sit in the chair that belongs to presence. Let the form point. Let the living Christ within be the life. So hear the contrast one last time in plain words. Not Christ outside as history only, but Christ within as present life. Not belief alone, opinions, doctrines, inspirations, but realization, the felt government of I. Not Sunday uplift, then 6 days of forgetfulness, but hourly remembrance until remembrance becomes the atmosphere of your day. Not authority imposed from without, but the indwelling I and my Father are one, establishing order from within. Not ceremony, but contact. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. Never forget that. Now the guardrails. Because tomorrow, the mind will try to steal your lunch. After you have known a few moments of contact, the mind will whisper, "It was just a mood. It was the music. It will fade." Don't allow that. Do not let the mind talk you out of your own experience. Also, do not measure by emotion. No need to hunt for thrills and fireworks. Measure by remembrance, and measure by liberty. By the degree of your success in remembering, this hour, next hour, later this afternoon, you may measure your progress. And by the evidences of harmony, the quiet where there was agitation, the rightness where there was confusion, you may measure that the contact is present. Forgetfulness is not failure. Let it be your bell. Hear it, turn, and resume. Now a simple weekly way. For 7 days, devote the first 10 or 15 minutes to morning recognition before you touch the world. Thou art here, or simply, I. Sit, still, surrendered, receptive. In the second 7 days, add hourly acknowledgments, 15 seconds, a half minute, at a set cue. In the third 7 days, add the before sleep sealing. Keep a small card, a line or two each night, noting the evidences. Faith will become evidence, and as the evidences begin to pile up, evidence will open into direct knowing. One bright day or night, the presence will announce itself so plainly that you cannot be argued out of it. Now go in quiet confidence. Keep the forms if you wish. Let them remind you, but never substitute them for contact. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. Be still and know that I am God. Here within you even now, I will never leave you nor forsake you. I go before thee to make the crooked places straight. My peace I give unto you. Take this as your charge. Return to the inner Christ now, today, not someday. Begin with this next breath. Thank you.